Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this little bit of Aramaic on a Sunday morning. And as we continue going through the Lord's Prayer, or the Our Father, we are going up to verse 12 today in chapter 6. But I'll go back and read from the beginning just again, so those of you that are maybe trying to memorize this or, you know, internalize it. I guess hearing the words to me helps me as I process this. It helps bring me in a mind frame as to what the disciples heard, what the people on the hillside heard as Jesus was speaking. So I think there's a great value in that. So we start here with the Avun Devashmaya Ne Kadash Shemach Tite Makutach Neve Sevyanach Hakana Devashmaya Af Bara'ah or Havlan Lachma Desun Kanan Yavmana. And then we get to our verse today, which is Shavak excuse me, Vash Vuk Lan Avayan I Kanan Daf Anan Shavakna Lechayavan. So a little bit more challenging of the words here. A lot of guttural sounds called the chet, something unique to Hebrew and Aramaic, or it's just say it's part of Hebrew and Aramaic that we don't have in English, is this chet sound, kind of a guttural saliva in the throat, breathe across it and create this rattling sound. German has it kind of like the ach in German. So now this verse here has been one that I remember from my childhood because at least in the area I grew up, the two major religious denominations used different words here. You would have the group that would say, "Forgive us our trespasses as we have forgive those who trespass against us." And then you'd have the group that would say, "Forgive us our debtors as we have forgiven um, those who are indebted against us." And so this was a point of contention. And I remember as a kid, you had those that were, there was division over this, and there was strong opinions over, those that say trespasses versus those that say debts. Um, so this caused a lot of division, and it's really kind of sad to me that there was such division over that. It's just a part of, I guess, human nature, the way it is, and what has brought us in our society to this place of what 43,000 different Christian denominations because of things just like this. So we're going to take a look at this word and find out, is it offenses? Is it debtors? Is it trespasses? What's really the issue here? So we're going to go and unpack this. And from here, we see that this word is the chet. Well, here is the chet, the vav, and then the beit, and then it has the yod, noon prefix, which gives it the plural of our, those, not just speaking of myself. And again, this is another part of the culture that is very, very interesting. Our current culture is very individualistic. I pray for my sins. I pray for my transgressions. I pray for myself. Notice here in Jesus's prayer, there's not a my in here, other than what we're going to see about forgiving. Otherwise, it's all wrapped up in community. It's those that are round about us, our Father, our, debts, our sins. And that's why this is in a plural sound. Yes, it can be plural because of the multitude of transgressions within us, but it also can be plural in the fact that we are responsible in our society to pray for those around about us, and being a part of our society, we collectively make up God's kingdom. We collectively make up the human race, and we are all connected and responsible. And in God's eyes, we are not intended to be lone strangers or off on our own. His intention was that we are collectively, as a family, brothers and sisters, communicating, interacting with one another, supporting one another, working things out between us, and getting along together. And again, very different in our culture today on how we have deviated from that Middle Eastern mindset. So we look at this word and we let's go and unpack this in the Jastros. It has a very neat understanding. So as we look at this word here, we see it starts out as debt, but it's connected right away to guilt. It makes a reference to someone who owes you money and that you are, at least the impression is that you're not able to pay. So you are uh, one reference here, and the one that made a big impact upon them is that if you owed money to someone, that type of connection of they owned you, if you will, they were lording over you because you were indebted to them, you owed them money, and you were responsible, and they could do with you what they wanted. They could take you, and if you didn't pay, put you into prison, put you into indentured servitude, sometimes a form of slavery, but not the same type as what we maybe know here from our tainted past here in the United States. Um, but what another neat reference is that it references the word of bosom, or like the trunk of a tree. Bringing it to, this is the core of what's going on. This is the internal base, the source of what's going on. It also has here an obligation or a duty, a sacrifice, all tied together. Here's the word for bosom, ramification from a tree. It has the word indebtedness and creditor again. So a lot here, and in fact, there's quite a bit of verbiage here talks about the guiltiness to be induced to sin. So the real root behind it here is the closeness of understanding of what sin does and how here it binds you. It's again the same word of chuv, declaring guilty, to be sentenced, to be responsible. And so all of these thoughts are packed into that word. And that's why it made it so difficult to just render it as a one word translation, because there's so much packed in, and it encompasses more than just owing money. It encompasses more than just a trespass or an infraction against someone. These can be sins that are religious, they can be moral, they can be legal. Any type of infraction, any type of transgression against another person would be collaborated or combined in this understanding of this word that Jesus was talking about. So again, very, very interesting. Um, I want to go to, those of you that know the rest of the verse, you know where this is going, and you know that this all makes sense, that it's talking about sins. But what Jesus is talking about here comes from sources in what Christians call the Old Testament. Jewish people would call it the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. It's not old to them because it's current to them. So sometimes by us using the word old, puts us in a thought pattern that it's not relevant. But everything Jesus taught came from those scriptural sources. And so we find that this teaching that Jesus brought here was nothing new. It comes from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, love thyself. And this is taken from the Sefaria Library. This is a resource that Jewish people, scholars use heavily to look at what did their sages say? How did their history record this and understand it? And we're going to find that this is very much the key of where Jesus drew from and reiterated in this Lord's Prayer. Of course, it comes from love thy neighbor, the rule of how to treat others. Again, this is key to Judaism. It's not just a Christian thing. In fact, the difference of Christianity and Judaism in this time of Jesus, there was no difference. Jesus was Jewish. The people who he were talking to were Jewish. This is Judaism as it was back when Jesus was teaching. So it was only later on that Christianity really kind of broke away and the differences separated them. But here, there was no difference. Jesus was just talking to Jewish people and he was reminding them, don't take a vengeance or bear a grudge. Love your fellow as yourself. I am the Lord. And there's another one that I find very, very interesting. There's a story about in a Sunday school class, the kids were given an assignment and they were studying, love thy neighbor as thyself. And they were asked to put down on paper what it meant to love your neighbor. And of course, the answers were kind of obscure. It was a little hard to say, what does it mean to love my neighbor? Oh, be nice to them, do good things to them, and so forth. And there was not a lot written down because it was maybe somewhat challenging. But then the teacher asked them, write all the things that have been hurtful to you in your lifetime, that people have done to you that have been hurtful. And as you can imagine, it was much more relevant. Your memory quickly went to those things that people have done that have hurt you. And the Jewish sages knew this. And so the rabbi would rephrase this. And here in the Sif in Shabbat, which is a form of the um, text that they study that unpacks what they have understood in the Torah, in the Bible, and puts it in a way that they can relate to it. And it was rephrased, and he said, what is hateful to you, don't do that to your neighbor. Don't do that to your fellow. And Rabbi Akiva, who was a very prominent rabbi after Jesus, said this is the great principle, and all of the commandments, or many of the commandments, depend upon it. And so, just very interesting as it breaks through here. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall not nurse hatred. You shall not take revenge. Is how they unpack all of this about loving your neighbor as yourself. And of course, when this was written and talking about who is your neighbor, of course, Jesus gives a story of the Good Samaritan, which we equate with being neighborly. But the Jewish people were in the wilderness, pretty much segregated from everyone else around about them. They had not settled in the promised land yet, but there were those that they came across. And everyone they came across was different than them. They were mostly pagan. They were all pagans. They were all idol worshippers. They were all a threat to them in many different ways. They all came from different backgrounds that were totally against what God was trying to teach them and lead them into. And so the difference between them was extremely great, but yet um, Moses was directed to write to love your neighbor as yourself. So even though the differences were so great in their minds, the cultures were so different, ethnicities were so different, forms of worship were so different, they were still instructed by God to love all of those uh, individuals like yourself. So as we try to connect this to the Ten Commandments, at least for me, it feels like verse 13, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal. These three verses really fit this portion here of, when things happen against us, when wrongs happen against us, and when we commit wrongs against others, they would fall, the action part of it anyway, would fit very closely within these three verses, maybe verse 16 of bearing false witness, but I think that ties in more closely with the intent and so forth that we're going to talk about in the last verse that we go through, which will be next week. So thank you so much for going on this little journey with me through the Lord's Prayer, comparing it to the Ten Commandments, and just the beautiful principles that challenge me, that guide me, that I need to be reminded of in how to be kingdom-minded. The verse that came to my heart this week was the one in Matthew that I'll reference, is if you want to be great in God's kingdom, learn to be the servant of all. And to be kingdom-minded is to be servant-minded. And to be servant-minded, it doesn't say who we are to be a servant to. Pretty much goes together here that everyone we come to, we have an opportunity, or everyone that God leads in our path is a better way to put it. We are to be servant-minded and be a servant to, and that's how we become great in God's eyes in his kingdom. God bless you all, and see you next week. Bye-bye.